Hello, everyone. Today I'm talking to Jared. I'm going to let him introduce himself and his work to you. So here he goes.
Deb, thank you so much. Recently, at the end of June, like the last days of June, early July, Deb and I met in Roswell at the Roswell Incident Conference, which was a pleasure. And she was generous enough to come to a presentation that I had there. And she wanted me to follow up specifically on some behaviors that I presented on. And I'm really happy to do that today. And so, in general, big picture, what my presentation was on was looking at two research papers by the same author, Dr. Acosta-Navarro, and one book by Dr. Richard Haynes. That I was looking for them right here. If I have them close by, I don't think I do. And it's on human-initiated contact. And I was basically just trying to summarize the most kind of academic or research-based content I could find on that topic for so many motivations. One is, I guess, having my own experiences with them and kind of turning to Google Scholar or wherever I could to look for more information. And it just seemed like it was lacking, or it was kind of under, under there was a lack of research on it, compared to things like near death experience or even certain psychedelic experiences right now. There's a lot of research papers you could find on that. Near death experiences, I think I mentioned that, but when it came to human initiated contact, there just wasn't a lot. So I was really excited to find a medical doctor with a PhD in Brazil who wrote a paper trying to authenticate CE5 experiences and or at least apply to them a high probability. And how he did this is he created 12 criteria, 6 subjective and 6 objective. And there was a team of 2 researchers, and they went through cases in the past and basically applied these 12 criteria to see if they would have a high probability of being authentic. And there are certain rules. Basically, each one was 1 point of what it took to be considered high probability, low probability, or inconclusive. His second paper was just a second effort with that. So that just came out in like January of 2023, but basically was new pairs of teams of researchers. So there's always 2 people there to kind of limit bias. And they looked at a new set of cases to see if they'd have the same findings, which I should have mentioned. The findings in the first paper is that there's a high probability that this is happening. And then in the second paper, they found it similar, but with the lower cases that were of high probability there. And I should note that when Dr. Acosta-Navarro, is defining CE5, he's kind of looking at it as a consciousness-based phenomenon or interaction communication with NHI. But it's not always necessarily human initiated. And I say not necessarily because there are cases where he covers Mission Rama, which is clearly a premeditated case where they're using meditation and things like that to reach out. But it isn't always necessarily that. It's just kind of looking at consciousness. And then Dr. Haynes, he's really looking at, he's looking at the human initiated part. So he's looking at a wider spectrum, though, of just trying to meditate. So this could be someone's driving their car and they see a UFO, so they flash their lights at it, and the UFO flashes lights back. And so in that case, there's kind of this interaction that was initiated first by the human flashing their lights. And so in his book, he covers how does the UFO respond to friendly behavior, hostile behavior, how do they respond to human thought, and then a bucket of miscellaneous kind of categories of behavior from humans. And then in the second half, he looks at humanoid or entity responses to kind of a similar breakdown of human behavior. And so, this was all very interesting to me because it did still cover Richard Haynes' work, did cover cases. There was some cases of Dr. Greer and the Sea Study work in like the early 90s, but there was other cases too of just people having these experiences where there is thought involved, or there's kind of this initiation with thought. And so even that's if someone sees a UFO at first, but the UFO is not doing anything and all they think is, will you come closer, right? And it does. And so all of that type of stuff I was highly interested in, and I was really excited to kind of summarize what that research was and then offer some ideas of my own of, how can we further go with research with human initiated contact. And I guess one of the biggest, not goals, but thrusts of my third part there of kind of ideas for the future was, that both of these works are still kind of historical analysis, looking towards the past to kind of see what data or patterns we could find from these types of cases, which is interesting. And you'll see these slides that I present on today about it. But if, Dr. Navarro is covering cases like Mission Rama, and Dr. Haynes is covering cases like CSETI or things like this, why don't we go to those kind of acts themselves to see if we can collect data in the moment when UFOs decide to appear or show up, or whatever that mechanism is that they come here by. And so yeah, that was kind of a summary of my research. But for this, what I'm excited to share about is I selected some slides. So would it be okay if I presented, Deb, and then I can kind of just cover the slides that involved behaviors?
Yes, let's do some visuals. Ready?
Okay. Yes. Can you see that?
Yep, it's on there.
Okay, awesome. So there wasn't too much individual behaviors that were kind of profiled in Acosta-Navarro's work. There was other things summarized, but there wasn't much. But this I was able to pull out, and it's really these top two charts here. And so starting with the left, and this is really a change or a transformation to behavior. And so this is a summary of both his cases. The first case was called the Final Contact Project, and the second case was called the Epimetheus Project. And so kind of as a summary of all of that data, because there was similar kind of traits when looking at the experiencers of these events. One of them was vegetarianism as a pattern recommended, and that's the top left for me, if it's flipped, but yes, hopefully it's top left for you. Where the orange would mean yes, that was a pattern recommended. On the left side there is the Epimetheus Project. That was the more contemporary one. On the right side is the Final Contact Project from 2016. And so you can see there was the highest there in orange. The gray here would be that the consumption of meat was permitted, and the green here would be that fish was permitted. And so there was a little bit of a variety to those responses, but that was just one of changes of behavior that I thought I could highlight from his research. On the top right, the other kind of change to behavior that I was able to pull out or highlight from this research here was critics of capitalism or money-based system. Here again on the left is the Epimetheus, the more contemporary research from 2022 or published in 2023. And on the right side is the Final Contact Project from 2016. Again, orange means yes, and no was 0 on both of these. So this was across the board 100% in both cases, that these experiences, if the data was relevant there or present in the case file, that they became critics of money-based systems. So that was one slide. Let me back out and go to another. So now we're going to go into Haynes, I believe. Oh, wait, no, I have a little bit more for you, I think. Let me see. No. We're going to go into Haynes. And so here's Dr. Richard Haynes. And you can see this breakdown of his book, like I mentioned. So in part 1, and I'm going to cover some of this in these slides here, he's introducing his methodologies that he uses. And really that's like what types of patterns is he looking for in all of these cases. And again, this is 242 cases that make up all of these chapters here. And so part 2 are UFO responses. And those chapters are broken down by how does the UFO respond to friendly human behavior, to hostile human behavior, to human thought, which was a very small chapter, and miscellaneous behavior, which was also a small chapter. In part 3, this is my breakdown of it. I think his parts might be a little bit different actually in his table of contents, but in part 3, it was humanoid responses, or entity, if you will, responses to friendly, hostile, and human thought and miscellaneous behavior, kind of smushed into chapter 9. And then part 4, he has tables that kind of summarize all of this data. And really what that's summarizing is back to part 1 there, which is how is he slicing this data and what patterns is he looking for? And so let's look at some of those patterns. I'm going to go to slide 45. Oh, wait, what slide is this? 45. Oh, okay. Well, not behaviors. I thought this slide might be interesting to you too, Deb. It's just kind of what are humans using to signal to UFO? And so you can see the spectrum across all of these cases of types of tools that are included here. And this includes a light beam, like a flashlight, with all different types of ways, including pulse coded. There's cases where the exact pattern of the flashlight is repeated. Yes. Other things like radio or acoustic, maybe you can apply some behavior with some of these physical projectiles that include, shooting an arrow or a gun or a bullet, missile from a plane. And less physical is just, using your vehicle, flashlights or to drive even towards it, right? Is a human behavior. And then lastly, with thought there. So not quite into his part one there, which is his methodologies and stuff, but I thought you would be interested in this. And then here we go. So here's the methodologies. So the first category is duration of behavior. On the left side of this table, you see the UFO or the alien response. And on the bottom in green, you have the duration of human behavior. And so, one second. The spectrum starts at 1 second and then moves all the way up to over 30 minutes. And you can see for under 1 second, that might be kind of confusing. So those things might include, there is language on the right here of flash, instant, briefly, pulse. This might more apply to something that the UFO is doing. It also could involve something with like a flashlight or something that the human is doing. So really this is, you can ignore the letters in the middle. What's more important is just to understand his breakdown here of under 1 second, 1 to 5 seconds, 5 to 30, a half second to 5 minutes, 5 minutes to 30 minutes, and then over 30 minutes. Because at the end, we'll get to kind of look at, were there any trends when he looked at all of this as far as, how long the human behavior was, and then what was the duration of response from the UFO. The next kind of way that he sliced up this data was looking at the complexity of behavior. And so again, on the left in blue is the UFO, and then on the bottom is human. And this is very simple. It's just low, medium, or high. And so low, it sometimes almost feels like there's no real thing happening. But some examples that he provides include low complexity for human would just, you see it, maybe you acknowledge it yourself, but you just kind of continue to drive. A medium complexity would be you see it and then you stop a few times, you pull over to look at it more, and you flash your headlights. Where high complexity of a human trying to, initiate response to UFO couldn't be, he sees it driving or she sees it driving. They flash their headlights, they get out of the car, they wave, they use human gestures, right? They shout, just, there's more complexity there of the things that the human do. And then on the UFO side, it's actually two categories. So it'll be human and then humanoid. So a low complexity human UFO response, just might be that they emit light, where a low humanoid response might be that they seem aware of our presence. Ramping that up to a medium complexity, the UFO might emit more kind of a complex light show or follow the human if it's in a craft here, right? This is the UFO. The humanoid's medium complexity might be directing its attention towards the human in some way. And then lastly, high complexity for UFO is, the UFO is using lights, it's beaming, it's circling around the car. The ET might attempt to communicate, use gestures, might have mimicry of human behavior. So again, when he's analyzing these cases, he's going to kind of break down both human and UFO or humanoid responses into these categories. And then let's see here. I'll be shorter on this, but he also does break down the data on, or is the human responding to a visible phenomenon? And so is this UFO or this humanoid craft already present and then they're initiating their behavior versus PB2 on the right, which is a premeditated response to a non-visible phenomenon. So compared to PB1, if responding to an already visible phenomenon, the scale is called PB1, compared to when there is no visible phenomenon or the person may have only felt the presence of the phenomenon intuitively, and that's PB2. So without seeing anything visually, you're still trying to initiate contact. And that's particularly where my interest was. Without seeing it present, would it respond to human behavior? And then lastly, this was just the duration between the human effort and the start of the UFO response. And Dr. Haynes, logically would favor shorter response times to indicate a genuine response to the UFO. All right, so let's go ahead then and dive into all of these cases. And I'm going to just look at some summary pages here. So for 61, sorry, this light's a little bright in my eyes. Let me just kind of hide that a little bit. So this is the UFO. We're going to stick with UFO responses for just a minute here. And this is UFO responses to friendly human behavior. And let me go ahead and present just to make this a little bit bigger. And so how did UFO respond to lights being shown at them? And this is the biggest table present. So the UFO responded to light by the highest percentage departing. They became brighter or changed color, moving down and kind of from highest to lowest. They approached the witness. Then they repeated the flash sequencing was the next amount of cases that had that response. Next would be that they disappeared or did something else. And then moving now to the top right chart, this is how did the UFO respond to waving, shouts, or other gestures. And the largest response in 50% of the cases here is that the UFO approached the witness. It became closer. And again, as you're hearing this, I think, because you'll summarize in chapter 10 here, I want you to kind of listen to, do these seem like intelligent responses from the UFO themselves? And then lastly, the UFO response to airplane movement. Did an airplane tilt its wings or do something like that? Most of its responses was that it accelerated away. So once a pilot had tried to initiate kind of communication with using the plane, most of the time it left. Okay, so then this table is going to summarize how do UFO respond to hostile behavior. And so stop and motion features. So you can see that the largest response to speed and motion features was that the UFO reacted immediately. That's not too detailed there. Let's look at this one, color luminance features. So the hostile behavior the UFO made of reacted by brightening significantly to hostile behaviors, but the lowest ones, which might be the most important here. So back to speed and motion. So if you use speed or motion to communicate, I'm sorry, these are the categories here. The UFO reacted after a significant delay. That's the least. The UFO acted by changing color. And auditory, lowest, the UFO reacted by emitting some audible noise. But you don't see a lot of hostile behaviors back from the UFO, which is what I was trying to look at. Even within the low responses, was there anything that was hostile back? All right, and then this is UFO responses to military aircraft approaching or firing. Here we do have a little sliver of hostile behaviors reacting, but the largest one, again, in over 40% of the cases, was that the UFO reacted by just outmaneuvering the plane, right? It just kind of took off and disappeared from this aggressive fire. There was some reaction of destroying the plane. I forget if that involved just mechanics failing or something like that. And then it reacted in other ways, it accelerated away, or it became invisible. But again, not a bunch of different types of hostile behavior back. Next was, how did UFOs respond to human thought? And so this was a short chapter. I forget how many cases it was, but not a lot, like a dozen or something like that, if that at all. And so some of these kind of brackets were just looking at cases that involve this and what was the response back. So in 7 cases where the witness transmitted thoughts, the UFO reacted by approaching the witness in all 7 cases, which is interesting. Of the 2 cases in which the witness was afraid and pleaded to be left alone with their thoughts, just thinking again, the UFO reacted by flashing a light in one case, and in the other case, it departed the area. And then there was 9 cases in which the witness asked it to perform a particular response. So I think there was one case in which a lady is sitting at a bus stop and she asked the UFO, she thinks, would the UFO come closer? And in all 9 cases, the UFO performed the requested response in all 9 cases. So very interesting. Might imply then that they're able to read these thoughts. So that was a very interesting chapter to me. Next is entity response. Oops, 67. Let me go here. Sorry. All right. So then now we're gonna stop looking. Sorry, I'm gonna turn off this light. We're gonna stop looking at UFO responses, and we're gonna look at entity responses. And so there were some common characteristics observed in these cases. One common characteristic is that the person thought that these visitors were associated with a craft or some other physical object. As far as reaction goes to friendly human behavior, that included waving back in one case. It involved a quick movement inside their craft in one case. It involved approaching, stopping, and running away in a friendly case. And then lastly, the UFO, the thing made a production of sound or some stomach pains or a whirlwind in one case. There was an absence of harm towards humans in all of these cases to friendly behavior. And however, there was limited communication with no significant information conveyed outside of obviously the acknowledgement of their existence. Sticking with entities for hostile behavior, Richard Haynes was pretty specific here, saying, I suggest that humans are the direct or indirect cause of all alleged aggressive alien responses in almost every encounter. If this can be proven to be true, the implications are enormous. It is impossible to control the aggressive tendencies of human beings, and therein lies the potential for the future whenever alien life forms may visit Earth. And so he definitely believes that maybe there's not, that when there's an alien aggressive behavior responding, that is most likely a response to the human aggressive behavior itself. And so entity responses to being fired at, there was 10 incidents analyzed there, and the ET or the humanoid response included immediate reaction. It fired something back. This was mostly some sort of like flashlight device that would paralyze the person, or in a lot of those cases, and then no movement or reaction from the entity in one case. Continuing, where there was physical altercation, the entity was knocked backwards in one case. One case it took hair, and there was a physical examination in one case. And then the last case here, when with a gum was thrown at it, it broke upon hitting the entity. Lastly, to forms of threat from the human, there was a few just cases covered here. These are probably less interesting, but the alien interaction after, this is what the cases were about. So basically, the human waved an ice pick, or response was that the inability to fire the gun after aiming it at the entity was the response to the human. A blinding beam of light after aiming a flashlight at the entity, and a knife hitting an invisible barrier after being thrown at the entity. Okay. Humanoid. And then continuing, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here, to thought behavior. So if someone saw an entity or a humanoid and they just thought something, this will be real brief here. The human thought it provoked a response in 3 cases. Human speech, now to miscellaneous behavior, provoked a response, and then also continuing miscellaneous behavior. The human motioned with the human motion without speech, and that also evoked a response. Okay, so then in this is going to get interesting. So I'm going to go to 73 here. All right, so looking at like all 242 cases, Dr. Haynes has this awesome kind of analysis and discussion or summary chapter. And so we're going to look at some of those initial ways that he sliced it up. And I'm going to skip over certain things like the time of day. Those were mostly during hours of darkness. And actually, I'll just go ahead and skip to this juicy stuff right here. So you remember the duration of behavior. That chart is on the right side here, where the UFO or the alien response is on the left and the human behavior response is on the right. And you can see the numbers in bold, meaning, so let's just look at 1 to 5 seconds in friendly human behavior. The UFO or alien response that was in one circumstance was under a second, and then in 2 circumstances, it was 1 to 5 seconds. So you can kind of see how that works up. So when we look at this, you can see the ones in green were kind of colored more darkly to show a higher, I don't want to say correlation, but to a higher frequency in that spot. And there was a little bit of something interesting here. So from 30 seconds to 5 minutes, if the human took 30 seconds to 5 minutes for their behavior to communicate, there was a prominent increase in having the UFO or the humanoid respond from that kind of 30 seconds to 5 minutes parameters again. And so that would be, you can see the human took 30 seconds to 5 minutes. The UFO or the alien, only 3 times was a 1 to 5 second response. 16 times was just 5 to 30 seconds, but 61 times was that same type of response category of a half minute to 5 minutes. Similarly, there was a prominent increase from 5 to 30 minutes. So that's like 37 out of, I'm not going to do the quick math, but the highest number again was a response backwards or back to the human of 5 to 30 minutes. Continuing into complexity. So let's look at this left one. This is UFO, and the right one will be humanoid. So on the left one, the blue category here is if humans had a low complexity in their type of initiation to communicate. And then on the chart, you can see out of the UFO responses, the largest bucket there was blue back to show low again. Orange being medium, and then it's hard to see, but there's green there is high complexity back. But the majority of the UFO responses to low complexity human behavior were also low. Similarly to medium responses, by a lesser margin here, but you can see 44 out of 77, it looks like, of the responses were medium back. So again, that highest percentage being medium back. On the humanoid, there's a little bit less data in these chapters here, but low to low is definitely high, 14 out of 16. Medium didn't win the contest here. The lowest response there was, but there definitely was an increase in medium responses back of complexity. All right. Okay, cool. So then really he's standing back and looking at all this data. Sorry, one more second of water. And I raised this earlier, but what he's looking for is, are there signs of intelligence within the UFO or the humanoid responses? And he thinks that he finds support, finding support the presence of higher intelligence. And so here's some reasons why. First is that the UFO act as if they're intelligently controlled. And so under this kind of, that they're intelligently controlled, that would include evidence over there's overt responses from UFOs to human behavior. The UFOs will duplicate complex human behavior in some instances. This might include patterns of lights from the flashlight, or maybe waving back from a humanoid, or things like driving your car in a certain pattern, and the UFO follows you to a T with how you're driving. The UFOs or similar response sequences observed when UFO are shot at and struck, meaning there's a pattern of behavior and when UFOs are shot and how they respond to that. Similarly, UFOs depart from airplanes but seem to approach cars during these things is another pattern. Secondly, moving back out here, just supporting the presence of higher intelligence. Dr. Haynes summarizes that the report suggests that UFO phenomenon exhibits self-restraint and not responding in kind to human aggressive behavior. So UFOs seldom fire back when fired back at. And I'll skip to the third one. Third, in most cases of human aggression, there was missed opportunity for deeper communication. So basically just saying humans missed out by responding violently or aggressively, which isn't indicative of intelligence or wisdom, he says. So then this is an interesting chart summarizing all of just the UFO responses. And so looking at the top, it's friendly human behavior. And you can see all the responses. There's like maybe 6 different responses that we have here kind of pulled together from the UFO. Next is hostile or aggressive human behavior, and we'll work down here. But so I just wanted to highlight the top responses in these categories here. So when humans are doing friendly behavior, the highest response of 12 was that the craft changed location or departed. Next would be that the craft returned the signal exactly, and the next would be that the craft approached the witness. So those are the top 3 responses to human behavior. The top responses to aggressive behavior would have been a light beam or ray was emitted. These involved the lights went out, it vanished from sight. Going down next is rapid intensity increased when a bullet hit it. Immediate change in flight path to UFO, and then it flew away when struck by bullets. So those are those categories. And then passive and miscellaneous human behavior, the top category here is that the craft paced the vehicle, so it tracked it. The second highest behavior here involves that the craft changed in way, so its intensity or brightness or color or something like that. Similarly, we'll look at humanoid responses to these categories. So to human behavior, it was even that the entities or humanoids, they waved back or they departed is an equal category. The largest response to aggressive human behavior was that the beings walked or ran away. The next largest one there would be that a light beam or ray was emitted by being. And the next category was there was no apparent injury to this humanoid. And then lastly, for miscellaneous human behavior, the highest, these are really low here in just categories. So, well, that's it actually, Deb. So I just wanted to take time to summarize, and his conclusions are, again, just going back to here, that if you just look at across all of this data, that it does seem like there's intelligent responses from the human behavior or from the UFO back from the there's intelligent responses by the UFO to the human behavior. And I hope you enjoyed that. My presentation would continue into like where I think research could go, but I definitely think this is super cool in the sense of that it's both performed by PhDs, Dr. Haynes and Dr. Acosta-Navarro. And I think that this is great research. You know, can these tools or these breakdowns continue to be used in the future, even live during your own, you know, human-initiated contact experience, to see if it falls within some of these trends of data, and also, yeah. So, anyways, yeah. So that was all of the behavior stuff that I thought would interest you. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll switch back to the main panel.
Right. So I wanted to basically ask you to summarize the human behaviors that people exhibited. Obviously, you went over quite a bit of data, and I could do it for you because I was listening, but I would like you to just quickly summarize for the audience the human behaviors and responses to seeing an object, a UAP, a UFO in the sky.
Sure. Can I look at my notes here?
No, that's cheating. I'm just kidding.
Okay,
Go
sure.
ahead.
Well, okay. I mean, I guess the behavior breakdowns, less by Navarro, but more by Haynes, was the behavior of friendly back. Those were the most cases that were covered. The next being hostile. The next being just thinking or using thought is a way to try to communicate. And then miscellaneous behaviors might just involve driving your car or tilting your airplane a certain way or things like that. The UFO responded to those friendly behaviors, mostly friendly back. I think the highest categories was, you know, second was responding back to the exact type of communication that the human did, or approaching the witness, coming closer, things like this. So there wasn't really hostile behaviors back from the UFO when the human behavior was friendly. When the human behaviors were aggressive, with a little sliver of some crafts going down or being destroyed, it does look like there was self-restraint being exhibited from both UFOs and entities in responding, you know, back in kind with aggressive behavior back. And the thought-based responses from the human, or initiating with thought, I thought were extra interesting in that, especially those 9 out of 9 cases that when the person thought of, would you do this, or would you move here, or glow brighter, or flash, or whatever, that the UFO did those exact things. So the implications there are interesting to me too. Are they reading these people's minds, et cetera, et cetera? But hopefully that kind of summarizes better the what the human behavior was and how those responses were.
I think that the research is incredible. Thank you so much for putting the visuals together and for presenting that. I also think it will be somewhat reassuring for some people, although I would discourage people from shooting arrows or bullets at UFOs.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It's not, I mean, it's the research of these two brilliant men that I'm covering, but I think it's super important. So thank you for letting me share some of it.
Right. And I really hope that you do more work like this in the future because I think your idea of putting it all together, putting the puzzle pieces together was really good. And I think it's super impressive. So I appreciate it. And can you please let people know where they can find you?
Yes, I'm on Twitter. It's at DAYARBO, Dayarbo. My handle is Jedicamper, as you see here. And yeah, I'd love to talk about this if this is something that interests you. So thanks so much.
Thank you and take care. And for anyone listening, if you want to just talk to Jared and get more information about the other research and that he has in the other slides, feel free to reach out to him. Thank
Please.
you so much.
Thank you.